pay property taxes if the land's already yours, of course? The answer is quite simple. It's not. Now can you spot the plot? It doesn't really matter how much money you got, because the feds feel entitled to whatever they want. Just like Pete Wichert, a man like me could never give it. So listen, when I'm telling you the truth is stranger than fiction. DJ VZ, my boys from way back. Pete Wichert from Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, Chicago's one and only truth radio show. Like to thank K Dudes, that's right, over there in Wisconsin.
Bed on my head and never pulled me no tongue. Jacket is hard in the hood and back in the yard. Stacking the chips on the road and back in the bricks. I wanna come up on, get no sleep. Doing moving with two guns up like Pistol Pete.
Fiction, and I'm really pleased to have a special guest that I just came across and has really really inspired me to think about a lot of things, from Tupac to artificial intelligence, and really a guy that has a lot in common with what all of us in the truth movement are fighting for. Jonathan Lippe, and thanks for joining the Truth is Stranger Than Fiction on April 18th, 2016. How's it going?
It's going great. It's a pleasure to be here, and pleasure to be amongst another info warrior, and also with all the great guests you've had in the past. I'm honored to have even been asked to be on the show. So I'm happy to be here speaking with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. Honestly, it's been hard for me to do a show, and I apologize for that. And really, you're probably my first guest since September 1st, when it was Lisa Haven, and that was probably one of my better shows. Great reporter for really the alternative media, and she's on Before It's News, has had her stuff published by InfoWars, so support her as well. But Jonathan, man, the reason I wanted really to I reached out to you was, and I had no idea about this white book, and then I find out too that you wrote your own book. So which one would you kind of want to start off with? You want to just kind of bring up a little bit about yourself and tell people that might not know you, what you really accomplished, man. You've done a lot.
Yeah, I'm a driven kind of guy. I've done a lot. I'm really creative. If I'm not creating, I'm not feeling right. So every day I got to produce something. But I started recording things when I was a kid, and then had a rap group in the 90s called Lyrical Fusion. We were one of the first internet rap groups that were out there, multicultural. It was something that the world really hadn't seen at the time, where you had white rappers, black rappers, Spanish rappers, Asian rappers. Everybody was in this one group, and multicultural groups didn't quite exist. I mean, you had Everlast and things like that, but it was never underground. And I'm hoping that we paved the way to bridge some of the racial and ethnic boundaries by demonstrating and showing on our own, hey, look, we could all get along, we could all get down together, we could all vibe together. Hip hop is for everybody. And we were fairly successful for the time period, being that the internet was not the way it is now. Back then, dial-up modems and then cable modems, and so on mp3.com used to be the place for internet music, and Master P had owned part of it. I think Ice-T had a part of it. And we actually charted for about a month with our album, The Final Toast. The Final Toast was our most successful album. We were in Murder Dog magazine, and that Final Toast had about 3 singles that were on mp3.com. They charted for about a month. We had relative success at the time. Then we turned into a rock group, because that rap rock Linkin Park era, before Linkin Park started going on, with Limp Bizkit, Rage Against the Machine, and that was called Superfly Crew. They're still a band to this day. Now, when I was in the group, it was 98. It's 2016 now. They're still going. They're still releasing albums, still performing live. So that's huge. And one of the singers from our group is Kendra Morris. She's kind of world famous now. She's got, big time music videos, a couple albums. So a lot came out of that. And then after that, I published books. Simulation Theory is the one I promote the most. And that book at the time was cutting edge, revolutionary. A lot of people thought I was crazy for even saying these things, but I was saying that, if you think about reality, you observe how it all comes together. We're probably living in some kind of advanced computer system. Now, saying that now, everyone's like, yeah, of course. But in 2007, this is before Facebook really. I mean, Facebook might have existed as a company, but it's not like how it is today, where everybody's communicating with everybody, everybody's sharing ideas. back then, that was weird to say those kind of things. Joe Rogan wasn't talking about it. There was no simulation argument with Nick Bostrom. So, at the time I was taking a big chance saying that. And even to this day, I'm trying to explain it to people. And the easiest thing I could say, if anybody's like wondering, well, how is that true? Just take gravity. If you take something and drop it, it falls. Now, for the flat earthers, it may not be gravity, but we could observe that things fall. It's a law, or we call it a law of nature, but it happens every single time. And that seems like a computer program. And it seems like when you think of the Matrix Reloaded, when Neo was speaking to the Oracle on the bench, she was saying how there's like a program that governs everything, for the way that bird flies, for the way these things happen. So I didn't invent the idea. There was movies like 13th Floor, obviously The Matrix, and others that presented this before I did, but they presented it as fiction. I think I might have been the first guy that said, hey, let's consider this as a reality, and let's see if we really observe this, if we can determine a bigger truth out of this. And I think that would change the way we see things, because we would all know that we're here voluntarily as gamers in a big, massively multiplayer online role-playing game. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And actually, recently, you were backed up by German scientists who did a study on that, and on really God. And their conclusion was that we are really just being controlled by a higher power, like a video game.
Mm-hmm.
So that completely 110% backs up your book, written well before they even had this meeting of really smart individuals, scientists, and that was their conclusion.
Right. Yeah. And the reason why I could even come to that situation, and I hadn't spoken to you about this earlier, is that my perspective on reality comes from my memories of where I believe I was before I came to Earth in the body that I have now. That sounds crazy still in present day, but who knows, 5 years from now, this might be normal. But I really remember where I was before I came to Earth. I remember choosing my life from a catalog of lives where there was life after life. There were some lives you could be handicapped, and all these other ones, they got to the life I have now. And the description, they all had a description. They all had pros and cons. A lot of them were like, oh, you could have all this material wealth, but this really tragic stuff would happen to you. And I'm like, well, if I'm coming back voluntarily, I want to have something kind of nice. And so it got to the life I have now. And they said, the description was, you will bring a concept to the planet that will change the way people will observe reality. Something to that effect. And I was like, wow, okay, well, what are the bad parts? Because that sounds pretty profound. And they're like, oh, this, and this happens. And I'm like, well, that sucks, but it's not like tragic like these other ones. And then I'm like, what else? Well, this, and this happens. And I'm like thinking maybe it's kind of a gag. I'm like, all right, well, can this person just not handle, these small little things that happen to them? And they said, no, and this is the part for everybody. They said, these things have to happen to you in order to shape you to become the person that you need to be in order to bring forth the concept to awareness. So it's like I've been conditioned and shaped through the people that I've come into contact with, which includes you, includes everybody. And all those encounters have shaped me to become the person I am now. So with that, so as I'm 2 years old and I'm in church, I'm watching people, belong to a religion, and I'm thinking this is far removed from what I remember just, 2 years ago. And so that perspective has stayed with me my whole life. When I was 5 years old, my mom gave me a tape recorder, and I was like, I need something like this. I need the ability to record my thoughts, because my role here is to bring forth a concept that's going to I don't know what the concept is. I'm thinking maybe the concept is me remember choosing my life. And if it happened to me, then it must have happened to everybody. And I liken it to playing like Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat, where you choose your character. You choose if you want to be Ryu or Ken, or in Mortal Kombat, you're Johnny Cage or Sub-Zero. Now, all these characters have pros and cons. Some of them could shoot, fireballs, but they're not good at blocking. And that's the same thing that I remember. So I like literally what I remember, it didn't look like a video game, but it was like choosing my own character. And so I'm me, Jonathan Lippe. And I even remember my parents taking me home from the hospital thinking, man, what did I just get myself into? Like taking me home from the hospital after being born thinking, man, what did I just get myself into? I hope these people are good people, which they turned out to be. But, it's like my memories are deep like that. And so simulation theory was kind of like my bridge to say, okay, if I could get people to go with this idea of it being a video game or a computer simulation, that's a lot easier than saying, hey guys, I remember choosing my life in the afterlife dimension, because I did try that route and that throws people off. So I figured, like a layered approach. First, get them to buy the video game simulation, which I believe, and then kind of like ease them into it. And that's why, this kind of bridges to the White Book and Tupac. When I saw someone like Tupac, that he had a similar experience. He was here on a mission. Whether you believe he's alive still or that he died, he spent that 25 years with a passion, with a mission. There was no minutes wasted. If you watch his studio sessions, he's telling the engineers, he's like, look, just keep recording me. I don't have time to listen to all this. You guys that like doing this, do this. But he had a whole agenda that he had to get.
Bring the guys later to mix it. I'm going to get my vocals down. Those guys could stay all night. They like doing that. I'm going to roll out, Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, absolutely. So that's what attracted me to Tupac, is because you could tell this, the people that are like this, you get attracted to them because you're like, man, that person's on a mission. Whether or not I agree with his politics or everything he's doing, I appreciated the spirit that was within him. And that's really what attracted me, was just, the rules didn't matter to him. He had his quest and he was going to fulfill it, and here we are nearly 20 years now. Yeah. 20 years later, we're still talking about Tupac like a current event. He's a current event. Tupac is a current event in 2016. It's bananas.
Yeah, I believe it's way bigger than the Elvis. I know people kept, bringing that Bob Marley. Even a lot of people think he's still alive. I mean, but no, Tupac, even in like changes, just talking about it, although, it might seem heaven sent, we ain't ready for a black president. I mean, even something just like that, it's almost like he was either psychic, or like he said, like he knew what he said numerous times he was going to die. He knew he was going to die young. Yeah. Surprised to see, his 21st birthday, things like that. So yeah, I agree with you. There probably is a similar experience where he saw not only his life but his own demise, and did what he could,
And it's funny too, because I don't remember if we were speaking this on air or off air, but we were talking about when I was in high school after finding out that Tupac had died on the radio, and when he was still alive, to hear him talk about "I See Death Around the Corner," I wonder if heaven got to get, all those songs. They didn't. It was just like, oh, he's just running his mouth. But then after you find out he's dead, and you listen to these same songs again, you're like, you hear the X-Files music starting to play, and you're like, man, what? So in '96, we're re-listening to all of his albums, and then, I hope this is the most quoted one, because All Eyes on Me was all we had. The Don Illuminati didn't come out yet, so when we heard he died, we played All Eyes on Me, and I Ain't Hard to Find comes on. That's the song with E40. And he starts off his verse, I heard a rumor I died, murdered in cold blood, dramatized. Pictures of me in my final state.
Mama cried. That shit was twisted. Some cowards got the story twisted. Like, I no longer existed, mysteriously missing.
Yeah. Like that. And we're like, we're driving, and we're like looking at each other like, what? This dude cannot be dead. There's just no way. There's no way. I mean, that described it so perfect. So, that's I just never could accept that he was dead, and it wasn't a grief factor. Like a lot of people just don't want to accept that Elvis is dead. I just couldn't accept that Tupac was dead. I never felt that he was dead, and no matter what I read, whether it's the Chaos Merchants, I narrated that whole book online, and that's under the idea that he is dead. I read the whole thing. It made me think, wow, maybe he's dead, but or the Greg Kading or any of these things that are out there, I'm like, that's a good story. That's plausible, and it almost brings closure. But I still think he's alive. And
that was one of my questions for you. So, I mean, honestly, I do too. And if I did know things like more details on why I believe that, I would never say it, just because I don't want government, the feds having any information. I mean, if he is peaceful and happy somewhere and away from all the drama and setups that were surrounding him and almost certain death if he would have stayed here. I'd rather have him be safe and happy.
Yeah, and actually, that's after reading the White Book and Chaos Merchants last year. I started to think, I'm like, we might be doing a disservice by keeping this whole thing going. I mean, it's good to keep it going, to keep the legacy of Tupac alive, but there's a lot of people, and I've encountered a lot of people now. They really want to find Tupac and speak to him and or reveal his location. And I'm thinking, man, that's if he really did pull off this whole thing, that's the last thing. If you love Tupac and you want him to be safe, he could never come back, because if he came back, the government would have to do something, to say you can't just fake your death and escape for 2 decades and come back. They'd have to do something to him to make it.
And there's technically probably charges pressed on him for beating Orlando Anderson up. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how statute of limitations work. It might be different per state, but he was going to go back to court he was out on bail. So, so he had a lot of motive to either fake his death or, to definitely fake his death, tons of motive also to, he just had too much life to be suicidal, although he does say I'm suicidal, so don't stand near me. But
my every move is a calculated step to bring me closer to an early death. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like you said, I mean, I even before my mom passed away, I had her really believing Tupac was alive, because we'd be driving in my car and taking her to get dialysis, and she would hear something and look at me. Did he just say it? And I'm like, yeah, you just said it. Yeah. And she goes, there's no way this guy's dead. No way.
We can just hope that he's alive. And the White Book itself, I had no idea what I was stepping into. I had some Tupac friends that are actually more advanced in Tupac knowledge. I call them the real Tupac historians of the internet. I'm just, acting on their behalf. And they used to say, John, we know how much you're into this Tupac thing. You got to read the White Book. You got to read the White Book. And it just seemed like it was too much effort, really. So I waited 8 years, but after 8 years saying, hey, did you read the White Book yet? Did you read the White Book yet? I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I almost threw it in the garbage. I went to the pool to start reading it. And I was like, man, I just don't have the time in my life to do this. I'm going to flip to a page. I'm going to read one page. And if this page catches me, I'll do it. And I opened it up, and it was to a page where the character of Jay-Z, who's A-D in the book, he's with somebody that's into witchcraft and the occult. And I was like, oh wow. I was like, wow.
Brother P, a guest I had.
Yeah. Brother P, yeah. And so I was like, all right, this is good enough. I'm going to take this thing on. I'm going to find a way to make this worth my while. And that's when I started the whole video series, and I had no idea where it was going to go. It exceeded my expectations. And the biggest thing is I thought there was going to be some hatred on it. But thankfully, and I'm very appreciative, the Tupac communities pretty much embraced it and accepted everything I did. And there was no haters. I fully anticipated haters. I never thought I'd get through the whole series, but there weren't any. So that means I hope I did it. I hope I blessed the good. Machiavelli the Don, I guess that's the author. He helped push it through Twitter. So I think from that endorsement is what, made it acceptable to people that he had, he was endorsing it. So
I mean, the author itself, it's just, it just says Machiavelli spelled with a K and everything. I mean, and this, you could buy this book at Amazon or on Amazon or at Barnes and Nobles, or how do you?
Exactly I bought it through Amazon.com. I think that's probably the primary place that you could buy it. I mean, you might be able to find it in an independent bookstore, but I mean, I just buy books online now, and I got it from Amazon for $20. Man, the $20 you spend is so well worth it, because I'm talking an odyssey. If you take the book serious, and I'm a lifetime conspiracy theorist. I thought I knew everything. Every chapter took me into areas that I had never even known about. And I'm thinking, man, whoever Machiavelli the Don is, or Machiavelli with 2 L's, the author of this book, this guy is so well read, such a deep mind. It's almost as if Tupac wrote it, because you would have had to been someone that had nothing but time on your hands. And I think that's why people believe it was Tupac that wrote it. But it's written so brilliantly that you're like, Tupac is brilliant, but he's not this brilliant. This thing is brilliant. And no disrespect to Tupac, but come on, man, this book is spectacular. It's the way Tupac would write something, and this, even if you take into consideration the school of arts that he went to, it just didn't seem like his type of writing. But that's what we're supposed to believe. It's like fan fiction, but it's so well done.
It could have been edited by a publisher. I mean, granted, I think it is in his hand too, like head of the education system in Cuba and on the terrorist watch list or something.
I don't know about the Cuba thing, maybe, but yeah, she's on I think the FBI's most wanted, and like Chris Christie, I think was talking smack recently about I don't know, extraditing. I'm not sure. I don't know what Chris Christie would have anything to do with it.
That is weird. That kind of leads me into something. I saw a video of yours talking about Marco Rubio,
right?
And how many times he mentioned Tupac, and I mean, geez, if I would have known that, I might have voted for the guy. I mean,
yeah, well, and I did that on one of the White Book episodes because at the time was like the first Republican debate. So, nobody knew the personalities of all the candidates. I'm from Florida. Marco Rubio's from Florida. Jeb Bush is from Florida. Ben Carson lives in Florida. Donald Trump has businesses in Florida. So I'm trying to figure out, all right, well, let's who is the Tupac candidate? And this is before Bernie Sanders was established. There was nothing established yet. So I was like, all right, if there was a Tupac candidate, who would it be? And Marco Rubio was sure campaigning to be that guy. That wasn't during the campaign. All those clips were from, I don't know, like a year or two ago. And he did suspend his campaign for a day to go see Straight Outta Compton.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and he got arrested for drinking 40s in a park at night.
Yeah. So yeah, Marco, he kept it cool for hip hop, but there's no way hip hop was ever going to accept Marco Rubio. But at least, this is what I try to tell like hip hoppers and Tupac fans. I'm like, before you hate on Marco Rubio for saying that, appreciate that he is saying it, because Republicans and conservatives for the most part aren't going to listen to rap music or hip hop. They're just not going there. But if you got Marco Rubio, speaking on Tupac, that lends credence to Tupac, Machiavelli, NWA, Eminem. So he's promoting that, saying, hey, I spent my time on these guys. These guys are worthwhile. Hey, I'm the senator, so maybe you guys should listen to him too. Or at least, consider these guys' perspective. And he talked about Wu-Tang Clan as well. So for Marco Rubio, a senator, to promote Tupac, I mean, he actively was promoting Machiavelli. I think he even said the Don Illuminati, which is really funny.
Yeah.
And for him to do that, that's a gesture of reaching out. Now you could say he's doing it for the votes, but at least he's got the frame of reference to do it. And that's what I was trying to say, was because again, I'm always trying to bridge people together. I know that Marco was never going to appeal to the left, Democrats, liberals. But there is a common ground. The common ground is, hey, Marco Rubio appreciates Tupac, NWA, Eminem. Maybe we could build with that. We could start there and find out what else we have in common.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's really what I've been trying to do myself with this show. I mean, I told you off air how I went to Ferguson with Joe Biggs and Jakari Jackson from InfoWars. And, really I tried to get, every side of that story. Try to find the common ground, try to de-escalate it if I could in any way, and really kind of try to bring the whole Alex Jones type message to an inner city here in Chicago, and kind of mix it in with the Tupac message. And actually, a lot of my first show's intro song was Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock playing the national anthem, but I used remix violent Kill Illuminati Tupac song for the intro, a few outlaw songs, and I'm trying to bridge that gap, because they make it seem like if you're a Trump supporter, you're racist. If you're an Alex Jones fan, you're racist. And I tried to just end that, and bring on rappers like K Reno and Brother Pete, and just show that, hey, there's people out there that think the same way, that are black, that are African American, whatever the politically correct term they want us to say is now. And unfortunately, the news like Fox, CNN, they're still pushing this harder, message harder and harder. And, my efforts and yours and plenty other people's have kind of been, doubled down by them in a sense because it was starting to work. It's working with the youth, but they're just going to spend more billions of dollars pushing the race card, really.
And and the way I try to bridge it for Trump is I don't know if it was a coincidence, but he announced his candidacy for president on June 16, and that's Tupac's birthday. So, if anything, Donald Trump, in a way, the present day, the candidate Donald Trump, to me, and I'm not speaking for the Tupac community, but to me, Trump's the candidate reminds me of Tupac because he's breaking all the rules. There's no one that's going to stop him. No one's going to tell him what to do. And like the founding fathers, the story I always heard is that the founding fathers pledged their fortunes, their life, their families, their safety for liberty. And if you think about it, Trump has put everything up: his fortune, his family safety, his own safety, all of his companies. He's has so much more skin in the game, and he has skin in the game for the prolonged prosperity of America. His companies depend on America, so he's got skin in the game more than any of the other candidates, to me. And
I agree.
And as far as like the racial stuff, I mean, I think that whole KKK thing was because David Duke, who's not even really in the KKK anymore, he's more like anti-Semitic now. I've seen him say on the Alex Jones show that he has no problem with black people anymore. He's got issues with Jewish people, but obviously they're going to roll with the KKK aspect because he was in the KKK as a kid. But he said he was young when he did that. He was misguided, and to be anti-Semitic, that's not good either. But I'm saying, call him out for what he is in present day, but what does that mean for Trump? Trump's like, I don't even know who David Duke is. So,
yeah.
He's getting
then that didn't really take him down. So what did they do? They choose the targeted getting women to hate him by promoting some things, I guess, like as far as the picture of Ted Cruz's wife. I mean, I thought it was funny. I see where he was going with it.
Right.
Probably wasn't a good idea to retweet that, but they're like the reporter from Breitbart. I mean, that case is a joke. I mean, I know that's found by you. He barely, did anything to that reporter, and they, right from that instant, is when his, basically his numbers have dropped with women across the country.
Yeah, and to keep your name, maybe it was for the publicity. I'm not even sure. Or there's going to be attacks on him, and there's more than two factions. It seems like we have about 4 factions in our country at this point, and that. There's the left and the right, and the left kind of characterizes anything that isn't consistent with their ideology of socialism, communism as racist. And there's a lot of articles about the Tea Party that came out, 4 years ago, that if you reinterpret the article, if you replace racist with they're against our communist socialist agenda, the article would make even more sense. And that's not to say that if you're against communism, socialism, you're racist. I'm saying that historically, that's the tactic from Leon Trotsky and whatnot to disenfranchise those that stand in the way of socialism, communism. And, so my issue, in a way, I applaud Bernie Sanders for, saying it's okay to call yourself a democratic socialist. I don't like it when it's under the wraps because it's confusing. You don't know who you're really dealing with. And, the way they phrase news and information, it's like, just be straight with me, let me know who you really are. And then I could deal with it. But when it's all shrouded, when the left does it, it's just as bad as when the media does it, the establishment does it, the government does it. I like to be just out in the open about the agendas, about what's going on, what your intentions are.
Oh yeah. And the guy, I mean, I reported on one of my shows, last 2 shows, was driving like one of probably like $125,000 car, So I mean, he's not exactly so far from that 1% that he claims. And like you said earlier, Trump is like the more like Tupac-ish candidate because he's not a traditional politician. He just speaks really off the top of his mind and from his heart.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what could be his eventual downfall, but it is also what attracts so many people to him and could be his really ticket to winning the nomination and beating Hillary Clinton if she's not in jail.
Right.
So I support him too. But what's your take on the belief, that a lot of people have that really our vote doesn't even count? Like everyone's already been picked out. Trump was put there just to kind of take the heat off all the Hillary Clinton scandals, and our leaders are elected before we vote.
When there's truth to that, but it's such a defeated. I'm not a defeatist. I'm not a negative person. I'm always optimistic and positive, and saying that even if that was the case, let's make it not the case. So, and there's always a way to disenfranchise people from voting, and I would say that your vote does matter in that, whether or not the delegates that actually cast the vote are what really counts. And and that is open if you read the way the conventions work. But if people come out in abundance, kind of like they did for Barack Obama, there was no way, because they knew that it could be stolen away if it wasn't so abundant. And so if people are abundant in their, if they demand it, if it's so obvious that if they didn't do that, it would be like, hey, come on, you're stealing the vote away from the people. You have to at least keep the illusion that it's real. That's where your vote matters. Your participation matters. And in addition, whether it's activists or protesters or just people that are like, oh man, the system's rigged, or just negative, or just negative kind of things that bring everybody down. I'm saying, hey, why don't everybody get together and go to the city council meeting, pack the place out, and do it more than once. Do it for like a month straight, and go to your county commission meetings. If everybody started going to these things and participating, you wouldn't be ruled. You would be an active participant in it. And so many people just sit on the side and whine about it, but they're not actively participating in it, getting into the game. And then once you get it, get not only show up, but also get nominated, get put on boards, get on the city council, or get on a small council or a homeowners meeting, or get elected. Because once you're there, then you have the ability to affect change. But if you're on a sideline whining, you're an armchair quarterback. You're not. You're just adding to the problem. You're not adding to the solution. So the solution is get involved, but not just with pom poms. I remember Alan West. He's from Florida, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. He was my first candidate for president. Although you probably disapprove of some of his foreign policy, but in Fort Lauderdale,
I actually never heard of him, honestly.
Oh, he's like the name of his book is America's Guardian, or The Guardian of America. I love Alan West, but he there was a speech he gave in Fort Lauderdale, and he said, "I'm not looking for cheerleaders. I don't need pom poms. I need bayonets. I don't need sunshine patriots. I need people that are going to fight with me in the trenches the whole way." And that's what we need to do. If, to affect change, we can't just wish for it. We got to be the change. And that's more than a slogan. It's so many small little things. Like if Alex Jones keeps telling his audience, you can't keep relying on me to be the guy that leads this. You guys got to start leading your own things. Adam Kokesh, he wanted to lead the Million Gun Owner March, but he probably would have been the only guy there. Would the rest of the gun owners have shown up? And
they set him up. I had him on the show. They basically, he was like a changed man from when I heard him on Alex Jones prior to that, when Alex actually warned him about getting set up. Yeah. He was kind of changed, very different philosophy. But I mean, literally, someone has video of them planting weed in his back pocket, and then him getting handcuffed at a pro marijuana legalization event. So. Yeah, you're right. He would have probably been there. Would have been a handful of people, but that's about it. Like to bring up an incident here, Joe Biggs and Infowars came to Chicago to cover Homan Square. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically a detention facility like Guantanamo Bay. and the Guardian broke it, and really, I thought there was gonna be thousands of people there, man. I went, met up with Joe, did a little interview. I'd say maybe it tops like 300, not even 200 people, maybe.
Wow. Yeah. And so and Kokesh was saying that everybody's got to start doing their own decentralized, kind of thing. So it's easier said than done. I'm not saying, hey, this is look, but it's actually this easy. If people started showing up to these things, it would frighten the government. They'd wonder, why do people all of a sudden care? So that get elected, get in positions, and we got to start affecting the change that we want. And I was speaking on the left, and what I'm trying to say to them is, in a way, I'm more liberal than they are, because I don't want to shut down the corporations through laws. I want to make them obsolete. And the way you make them obsolete is by ending artificial scarcity. Because if you look at all the problems in the world, at least in our country, it all stems from artificial scarcity. For instance, racism. If artificial scarcity wasn't there, and that's basically that they're telling us that everything is scarce when everything is absolutely abundant. And through technology like 3D printing and whatnot, everything becomes totally abundant and kind of like MP3s. Jeremy Rifkin, he talks about the near zero marginal cost society. And he's like, what's going to happen when people figure out that there's a Napster for everything? And so when that happens, like, let's say racism's going on, what would you care if racism would cease to exist? Because if a group of people hated another group, it would be like, well, good for you, keep hating. But, I have the ability to manufacture all the necessities of life that I need. And, the whole economic system wouldn't be holding any group of people back. So to me, that's there's a silver bullet and a single solution, and that's the ending of artificial scarcity. And when I say that, I don't mean it as a code word for ending capitalism. I mean it as the same way Jeremy Rifkin's saying it is, the technology is there to create absolute tremendous abundance for the whole entire planet. He didn't come up with this idea. This has been going on. I was reading Grunch of Giants. I'm doing a series on it on my channel. And Buckminster Fuller said, he's like, look, I worked on projects that could make it so that everybody in the world, not just the United States, could have the lifestyle of a billionaire. And there's a small percentage of people that don't want that to come out. And in that case, I'm like, Occupy Wall Street was right. Just their tactics I didn't like, and what they meant. But this 1% controlling everything, it really seems to be fairly accurate. And,
oh yeah, I mean, you got the Bilderberg Group. You got so many different, secret meetings. You got so many different councils, and really just, it's out in the open. It's forever. I lived in California for a while, and they shut down the entire highway, for these people to go sit there and basically worship an owl at Bohemian Grove, and I'm not joking. The people in the town really did support these people there. And I mean, there's almost proof that there are one of our presidents, well, two presidents, discussed who was going to run first, being Nixon and Reagan, I believe. So, I mean, they're making decisions about our future behind closed doors without our say on anything. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose of a democratic system.
Yeah, and it works that way because they've successfully disenfranchised people from participating. And so throughout, and there's all kinds of ways to disenfranchise people from doing all kinds of things, whether it's voting, participating, working, building a business, having self-esteem, self-confidence. Everything's like, there's all these roadblocks there to try to get you to quit. And I liken it to the original 8-bit video games. Those games were complicated, and even the Atari era, they were hard. You had to, you would lose more than you would win. And it almost weeded out the winners and losers, or the people that had that dedication to keep losing with that desire to win. And then they started to dilute the games, and now the games you can't even lose. It's just you just keep going on, and that's how they added it. But
And it's moved down to competitive sports too. Now it's like even the losing teams as kids get like trophies, and the winning team could go undefeated and they get the same trophy as a team that lost every game. I mean,
exactly. Man, if we, as a kid, if I wasn't playing and keeping score, I wasn't interested. Like, if we're not keeping score, why play? And it's not that I want to beat you. Like, I don't want to beat my friends, you know what I mean? But I want to compete, and it's really a competition with myself, but it's got to matter. We could play a friendly game of basketball, but it doesn't get fun until someone kind of gets nudged a little bit harder, and then you start to take it a little serious. And
it's just like running on a treadmill or something. If you're not keeping score, I mean, honestly, but it's just one of the other indirect ways that they try to control us. But how did you actually first find out about InfoWars, Alex Jones? How long have you been following those guys? And really, it's just kind of amazing to find another info warrior out there. And I was really happy to hear that, man. Did a lot of work for them, as everyone knows. I've done the petition to help stop the Syrian war that got sent to Obama himself. I've had like Jesse Ventura article published on InfoWars. Pretty much had a ton of views. Protesting NFL, this gun commercial. I had really contributed a lot to them, and I wouldn't be, especially in the situation I was with the show, without people like Mikhail Balin and Joe Biggs and Jakari Jackson and all those guys. So I owe them a ton. But how did you actually first get really start following them?
Yeah, well, first off, I really appreciate your work ethic, by the way. Like, all the follow-up we've done is tremendous. So, you definitely in your spot. Your work ethic is amazing. But as far as Alex Jones, I discovered him in 2001 prior to 9/11 happening. And I got a pretty big story to tell you about that. But for me, conspiracy theory, my focus was on aliens and time travel. But prior to 9/11 happening, that's all that really mattered was aliens and time travel. Government, I knew people believed in government conspiracies, but it never affected me because I was a high school student, or I was a college student, or a middle school student, or an elementary school student. That's how far back my conspiracy goes. And I was always under government control as a student. So the idea that the government's controlling our lives was like, well, yeah, I mean, I have to go to school, otherwise it's truancy. And so nothing mattered. And I'm going to tell you how I got to Alex Jones, but there's the story that led to this, you'd have to know. So the first story is that Tupac, an album was called The Don Illuminati, and before was that he had mentioned he was naming his album The Don Illuminati because he wanted to kill the Illuminati. And at the time, the only exposure I had to those concepts was Goody Mob on the song Cell Therapy. I don't know if you know the song, but it's "Who's that peeping in my window? Oh, nobody now." And they mentioned the New World Order in this song. And I remember my friends were like, "Hey, you hear what they're talking about? They're talking about the New World Order." And I'm like, I don't even know what the old world order is. I was all about aliens and time travel, and that was it. And so, well, I'll tell you what Alex Jones was. To get conspiracy videos, I had to put up with a lot of like Christian end times prophecy VHS tapes, because you'd have to deal with, Jesus is your Lord and Savior. I'm like, okay, I'll go along with that to get to the, end of the world stuff, the New World Order stuff and whatnot. And so I was searching on eBay when it like first came out for New World Order video. I wanted to know about this New World Order because I'm thinking, man, 5 years ago, Goody Mob, Tupac, they were all telling me about this. So I searched New World Order on eBay. Two people came up, David Icke and Alex Jones. And I was in a computer class, and this guy sitting next to me goes, "Do you know who David Icke is?" And I go, "Who?" He goes, "You don't know who David Icke is? You like aliens? You don't know who David Icke?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Check it out. He's talking about the reptilians." I was like, "All right." So I get these David Icke. I think it was like the Children of the Matrix, and I love the Matrix. I was like, "Okay, well, this guy's talking about the Matrix. Let me get this." And Alex Jones, I had the Wake Up or Waco, but then the first one that really caught me was The Matrix of Evil by Alex Jones. So Icke and Jones were talking about The Matrix of Evil, and that's where I found out who Ron Paul was for the first time, because Ron Paul gave a speech, and I'm like, who's this congressman? He's talking about the New World Order. He's talking about all this stuff. He's elected, which goes to my point was, get involved and get elected. Ron Paul did it, and look, Ron Paul started a revolution. So I basically found out about Alex Jones through eBay. and I didn't even know, yeah, and I didn't even, it was just the DVD was like some home copy DVD. It wasn't like a professional disc, and it just said New World Order, something else. I'm like, let me buy it. And it was just Alex Jones in Austin, Texas, in his, it wasn't like the InfoWars that you see now. It was him in like this room, and it was public access, and it was just him talking about stuff. And I'm listening to him. I'm saying, man, this makes sense. This makes a lot of sense. This is making everything start to make sense. And what that makes sense is I was telling you I was into aliens and time travel. So Al Bielek, do you know who Al Bielek is?
No.
Have you heard of the Philadelphia experiment?
Yeah.
So
with trying to make the boat disappear.
Yeah. So Al Bielek, whether or not this really happened or not, I'm not saying he was telling an accurate truth, but he's known for the Philadelphia experiment and Montauk Project. And so in like the 90s, I seen him on this show called Prophecies 3. And again, Prophecies 3, it's kind of like you had to put up with the religious stuff to get to the good meat stuff. And I was willing to put up with it. I was like, all right. So he was on it. And of all the different things that were on, I was like, this guy, Al Bielek, I got to find out more about him. But there was no World Wide Web yet. It was like, if anything, it was in its first year of its infancy, because it was 95, 96. And so I had to find tapes and whatnot. And in like 2000, this guy, Michael Hautsager, released a 24-hour CD of interviews with Al Bielek. And I listened to the whole thing, and I'm like, man, it was so awesome for somebody. Like nowadays, it wouldn't be worthy because you have YouTube and you have the whole thing. But having this disc was amazing. And after I graduated college, I was like, you know what? I got to clone myself out. I got to stop doing this conspiracy stuff. I got to join the workforce and just turn my mind off. So I wrote this 8-page letter to the webmaster of albielek.com. And he liked this. And I was saying like Al Bielek really, advanced my life from all the concepts I learned from him. Me and my friends spoke for hours philosophizing, and I just wanted to thank him, but I have to move on. And the guy liked the article, the note so much, he called Al Bielek and read it to him on the phone. And Al was like, have that young man give me a call. So like I'm like 21, the year's 2000, and actually the year's 2001. That's important. So I graduated May 2001 because I'm getting to 9/11, and but 9/11 hadn't happened yet, and I'm pacing around. I'm like, oh my God, Al Bielek wants to talk to me. Like, this is gonna be so amazing. So I call him the next day. We ended up talking for 3 hours, and the stuff he told me on the phone, it offended me so bad, but it all came true. And this is what he told me. So one of the questions I had to him, I was kind of like interviewing him. I said, Al, and I should point out that on the discs, he had said, because he said he time traveled to the year 2137. And he said he watched television. And he said he was there for 6 weeks, and all TV was like the History Channel nonstop. There was no educational, no entertainment. Everything was educational. And the guy, Michael Hautsager, interviewing him says, okay, well, because he said there's going to be a war at the beginning of the 21st century. That's what he saw on the television in the future. And Hautsager's like not buying it. He's like, oh yeah? Well, if there's a war at the turn of the century, who's the president? And Al Bielek goes, that's a really amazing question, because there's going to be a problem with the 2000 election. And this interview is happening in 99. And he's like, yeah, there's a problem with the 2000 election where he says the son of George Bush, he's the governor of Texas, is going to be the candidate for the Republican Party. And there's going to be like a third party candidate, and there's not going to be enough. There's going to be some problem with the election, and it's not going to go to Al Gore. The privilege of being president is going to go to George Bush Jr. And he's going to discover that he wasn't briefed by his dad about what's really going on in the world. And he's going to be faced with this big war. So when I'm on the phone, that's what he said in 99. And Clinton was president at the time. And so I'm like, okay, well, George Bush got elected, and there was a problem with the election. So I'm like, man, Al was right about that. So I said, hey, Al, you said there's going to be a war at the turn of the century, but I don't see anything like that happening. We're focusing on Gary Condit, Chandra Levy, and the recount of the Bush-Gore election. That's what was on TV at the time. I'm like, I don't see any beginnings of a war. And he goes, well, you're going to see, this is crazy that he said this. He goes, you're going to see the beginnings of this war take place before the end of the year when bin Laden and his boys blow up the World Trade Center.
Wow.
And
Word for word like that.
yeah, and the year was it was like the month was June, I think, because I had recently graduated. I wrote the letter. It was like June or July, and and it's funny because my senior year in college, I got rid of all my material possessions because I was taking 21 credit hours. I didn't want any distractions. I had toilet paper and clothes, and my friend used to call. He's like, "Hey, dude, there's this Al Qaeda network. This guy named Osama bin Laden, and he's training people to kill Americans." And I'm like, "All right," I would get voicemails. He like kept me in touch with the world, right? Because I was just studying hard, and I felt like I didn't do my homework to speak to Al. I was like, man, my friend was telling me about this Bin Laden guy and Al Qaeda, and I don't know anything about terrorism, except I remember Biggie Smalls had "Time to Get Paid, Blow Up Like the World Trade." And so I was like, wait, didn't that already happen? Because Al was an old guy. He was like 81 when I talked to him. It's like, didn't that already happen? Didn't he like blow up? And he's like, no. They only blew up one floor. Yeah. I'm like, okay. He goes, this time, both of the Twin Towers will fall, and Bush will send the world into a fussy by making nations choose sides in a supposed war on terror. And like, that's what happened. But if somebody told you that before it happened, you'd be like, what's a supposed war on terror? And did you just tell me that the Twin Towers were going to fall? I mean, if somebody told you, hey, the Twin Towers are going to fall by the end of the year, you wouldn't believe it. I didn't. No. And I was like, I thought it was funny that he used the word fussy. And I'm like, huh. And I was like, what's the supposed war on terror? And then he goes, an axis of evil will be defined. I'm thinking,
wow. And that was used in a Bush speech, word for word.
Yep. And he was in World War II. So I thought maybe he was like, thinking back when he was in World War II, I was like, you talk about the Axis powers? He goes, no, that was Germany, Japan, Italy. He goes, this is the axis of evil. And it's going to be Iraq, Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Afghanistan. And I said, Afghanistan? I just saw Rambo 3. Didn't Rambo help the Mujahideen defeat the Soviets? I thought Afghanistan was our ally. And he's like, yeah, well, no, they're not going to be anymore. And I really didn't know much about global politics, but I did see Rambo 3 and I saw Spies Like Us. Now, I was like 21 at the time, and there was no internet like we know it. And really, Alex Jones hadn't come into my life yet. So yeah, he told me all that happened. Oh, and then he said, in 2003, we're going to invade Iraq. And I said, Iraq? That just didn't make any sense to me. I was like, why would we invade Iraq? We did that in 91, and Clinton just dropped some bombs on some medicine factories to avoid impeachment. Can they fight this time? And he says, no, we'll roll through the capital of Baghdad within a month. And I'm like, okay, well, how does that change everything? And he's like, well, a lot of resources become up for grabs at that point, and it's like a power grab and whatnot. And sure enough, after the Twin Towers fell, I was like, oh man, could I have prevented this if I told people? Would they have believed me? And so I tried telling everybody. I was like, man, this guy told me there's gonna be a war with Iraq in 2003. We gotta, I gotta tell everybody. So when those tanks first hit Iraq, I was getting phone calls like, John, turn on TV, man. There's tanks in Iraq. Your boy Al Bielek was right. Holy cow. And so So after 9/11 happened, I'm starting to look at everything a lot different because, the news is telling us, oh my God, Osama bin Laden and 18 hijackers did this. And I'm like, well, how did Al Bielek did say it was bin Laden. He didn't mention 18 hijackers. Maybe he did. I don't know. But this, how did Al Bielek know? If he knew, then someone else must have known. And that's when I started to look into Alex Jones, because Alex Jones was saying, this is an inside job. And he was saying that bin Laden's going to do it. So was Bill Cooper. And I'm like, how do these guys know this? And so that's how I found Alex Jones. That's a long story, but that's pretty much through Al Bielek.
Well, I mean, it's documented too. They had the Project for a New American Century with, Jeb Bush even on it, Cheney, Rumsfeld, I believe all those guys talking about, basically going into all the countries we have, or at least attempted to, and that we need another Pearl Harbor-like event. And sure enough, there's 9/11. As far as you being able to prevent that from happening or warn people, I don't think you should have any guilt about that, because most people in your shoes would have thought the guy was absolutely crazy, to
Right.
be honest with you.
Yeah.
So, I highly doubt, your word would have really prevented things. But to back that, your point up of people knowing insider trading,
Yeah.
Max Kaiser, other people I've exposed that, I've exposed on my show. I mean, we've had so many, half the people were there really there's many different theories on actually what happened, whether there was even a plane. There's people that claim there's cars spontaneously combusting and paper. So I mean, there's still a lot of questions. The government's official story itself is a conspiracy theory, really.
Yeah. Oh, and that's also like, a lot of friends, because I've been involved with hip hop my whole life. They're like, how can you vote for Trump? And I'm like, well, besides being part of hip hop, I've been in conspiracy, my whole life too. And there's better words than calling it conspiracy, but I've been an info warrior before InfoWars, but Trump was a birther and Trump is a truther by definition. If he's asking for the 28 page, or how many pages it was like 28 pages that were
28
removed.
pages.
Yeah. So if he's asking for that, and I'm like, look, I'm with Alex Jones, with whether you call him a shill or whether he's a fearmonger, or, where his heart's at, and his tactics aren't the way I do things, but I feel like I'm on his side and he's on my side and he's for America all the way. And if he's behind Trump and Trump's a truther and a birther, and Trump's the biggest conspiracy candidate that's out there, putting it all out there, his whole reputation on the line. That's why I'm behind Trump, is for the conspiracy angle and for the fact that he's got skin in the game. And that's one of the things I try to drive home to people. It's like, if you're complaining, but what are you doing to make it better? Yes, I'm not going to deny you. Yeah, things aren't right. Life isn't perfect. Life isn't fair. What are you doing to make it more fair? And in other ways, what are you doing to create your own lane? Just because the world's never going to accept me. They're going to accept conspiracy. They're going to accept I remember choosing my life in the afterlife dimension, simulation theory. They're not going to put me on TV. So I created my own lane. I have my own channel, YouTube. I get interviewed by like-minded people. So you create your own lane. You've created your own lane. Alex Jones created his own lane. David Icke created his own lane. A lot of people create their own lanes. And that's the beauty of America, is that you can create your own lane. We could be entrepreneurs. We could own businesses. I just ran into a guy that I go to his sandwich shop all the time. He's from France. And I was like, wow, why would a guy from France, live in the United States? I was like, what brings you here? It's not too often you meet a French immigrant. I mean, there are some, but you're like, wow, okay. And he's like, well,
It's rare.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in present day. And he's like, well, I wanted to own my own business, and the opportunity to be an entrepreneur in France, just, for his economic level.
Oh, wow.
There.
Sorry to interrupt you, but as we speak, there is a black military helicopter, huge actually, flying over towards downtown Chicago.
Do you remember when people used to say, "Oh, you believe in black helicopters?" And it's like, well, yeah.
I'm telling you, they're not a day goes by they don't fly over, and they fly pretty low, shakes the whole house. My grandma could come on air and testify. I've caught them on camera and put them up on my page, and that's still a conspiracy theory to the mainstream media, and a lot of smart people that unfortunately are brainwashed by it still think that's a conspiracy theory. Yet they've been caught training, and I mean they've been broadcasted on the news even.
Well, the
cases here in Chicago.
Could you imagine if Waco, Texas, occurred in present day with all the cell phone cameras and the internet? And people forgot that really happened. That's crazy that happened. When you look back on it, you're like, man, that if that happened today, the whole country would be up in arms on that.
Yeah, I mean, they basically slaughtered a bunch of innocent children.
Yeah, and that's why there's just the factions I was talking about earlier. Everyone's at each other's neck. The right, the left, the establishment, the independents. Like I think Trump is representing, like the conspiracy theorists and the freedom-minded type people. Freedom-minded people listen to Alex Jones. I don't want to call them conspiracy theorists. They're just realists, about freedom, about they might prep. They know what tyranny looks like. They remember that, they might be older. They might remember tyrannical regimes, dictators, and what that looked like. And, those guys are going to be gone. The last people that remember real tyranny are going to fade from the earth within the next 20 years. And it's just going to be us. And, you and I have a frame of reference, but we didn't experience it to know, what it really looks like. And I don't know what's going to happen to the USA when the older folks are gone, because they're the last.
That's a really good point. I never thought about it like that, actually. My grandma who passed away, we're both, all my family's from Germany. And my grandma that passed away, well, we, had family that was basically career military from, excuse me, I'm kind of battling cold, from World War I to World War II. And then my grandma, who actually, lives upstairs, she and her sister got separated because of the Nazis. And she, both of them really enlightened me on, what happened at a young age and how Hitler got people to really look at him as like a god, and kind of warned me, and that's why, one of the questions I kind of wanted to, touch on and ask you is like, do you see our government transforming into a fascist government? Because really the definition is when corporations control the government. So in my eyes it is. And how close do you think we really are to like a martial law scenario? Because a lot of people that have experienced it are outraged, and they do believe it could happen again.
Yeah. So I think it'll be covert. The control is covert. They have the overt mechanisms in place should they need them. And in a way, like the coffins that we see, the FEMA coffins, in a way, if they didn't have coffins because it's FEMA, they deal with, and I'm not trying to back up what they do. I mean, that's crazy that there's coffins, but if you think about it, you're like, well, if they didn't, FEMA's always blamed for not being prepared. So it's like, all right, they got 500,000 coffins. That's a lot of coffins. But, if there was a major nuke or a major hurricane, in Florida, there was devastating hurricanes and Hurricane Andrew, and you need to have that. But like those threat fusion centers that from the Jesse Ventura show, that was interesting. The militarization of police. I live in Vero Beach, and there's just like zero crime here, but yet the police department got a tank. Like, it's not quite a tank, but it's like a
armored vehicle.
And it's like, well, and if I was them, if I would be doing the same thing, not that I want to control the people, but you know what I mean? Is like, they're trying to protect their interests against a massive, huge 300 million plus population. And they want to protect their assets. So they're going to, and plus we're also gearing up for a civil war. As I kept talking about the factions, this election if it's Trump versus Sanders, we got two opposites going at each other, or Trump versus Clinton. It's two opposites going. And I don't think either side is going to be happy with the outcome, because
no, that's funny you bring that up. If Trump wins, there's going to be riots. And if Trump loses, and especially at a contested convention, there's probably going to be riots. So either way, there's going to be some kind of increased tension between these two factions, really. And a lot of the tension has been, due to the money invested by a lot of Democratic people like Hillary Clinton putting like money into really commercials that are promoting Trump as this racist. So, in part, she's responsible in my eyes too for that as well.
Oh yeah. There's been so many police riots, police related riots going on. So that tension is building. You have the left marching all the time. You have the Occupy Wall Street Tea Party. Tea Party's on the right. It's almost like, one of my friends told me, he said, and he's a leftist. I'm not a leftist. I'm like a nonist, but I'm more like, I'm libertarian, right centered. And he's like, look, does it strike you that there's a Tea Party and an Occupy Wall Street at the same time? How could both extremes be upset at the same exact time? one party should be happy and the other one shouldn't, right? But then I asked somebody else, a wiser person, and he said, well, you would see that if you had the beginnings of some form of I'm not going to call it a civil war, but some kind of a faction war break out. Because and Bill Cooper, who's like the Alex Jones before Alex Jones, he's like, look, the only outcome, he sees three outcomes. One is education, and that's going to be hard to do. Two, and the education would be on the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and getting people to understand freedom, liberty, and all that. That's the best outcome. He's like, that's the most unlikely to happen. The second, I forget, and the third was civil war, because the left and the right can't really coexist. They're complete opposite economic perspectives. You had mentioned fascism, and oftentimes my leftist friends, they send me memes that say the government is the corporations. And so, I guess it's a fascism, but fascism, it's National Socialists were the Nazis. So they were by name socialists. And then you had the Soviet Union. The United States backed the Soviet Union. We were back in communists. So it's like a crony fascism, crony socialism. It's an economic system that really hasn't been defined because it doesn't fit perfectly in fascism. It doesn't fit perfectly in socialism. It doesn't fit perfectly in communism. It's like a hybrid of all of them, but the regulations, it's crony everything. It's not free market capitalism.
That's a great point.
So I don't know what to say, but oftentimes, have you ever read Atlas Shrugged, the book Atlas Shrugged?
No.
Oh, okay. That book is transformative. I read that, and this guy named John Galt starts his own. I'm not going to get into it. It's considered the second most influential book in America after the Bible. And
really?
And there was a trilogy movie that came out about it. It equipped me to be. Democrats, leftists have kind of like manipulated me in my childhood and my early adulthood. So I have like a kind of like a grudge. After reading that, I could debate any of them forever on anything because that book just equips you with such knowledge of their ideology, what their intention is. And she's saying that it's a culture of death, that they're cannibals, that they just destroy kind of. And so John Galt takes everybody. So John Galt, this is an interesting concept. John Galt grants the protest. So he says, okay, the men of the mind, the producers of society, you think we're the evil? What if I remove us from society and leave you guys the country? It's all yours, but all the men of the mind are going to be gone. All of the producers are going to be gone. Everybody that makes it happen because you think they're the evil, we're going to remove them from society and let's see how it goes. And he takes them to his place called Galt's Gulch or Midas Mulligan's Ranch, and everybody pays in gold. There's no fiat currency allowed. It's just gold, and everybody earns their keep. So there's no freebies, there's no welfare. It's like a libertarian. It's like what Ron Paul wanted, and I think Ron Paul and Rand Paul and Adam Kokesh. Yep. So and I bet you Adam Kokesh read Atlas Shrugged. He'd probably have some differences with it just because he's so intellectually into his philosophy, and you got to appreciate that about him. Whether or not you agree with it, seeing him go toe to toe with Alex Jones was like, man, this guy, he's got his philosophy down pat. I love watching Adam and the Man, where he leads people down the path. He seems all nice, and then he kind of like throws things in about the taxation theft and
correct too. I mean, he's probably the only person I've ever seen come close to actually out talking Governor Ventura.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and you got to commend him. I mean, who knows, what's going on with Adam Kokesh, but like he's like a Tupac in a way, where you just see that you're like, this guy is driven. And I didn't agree with everything Tupac did. I didn't agree with everything Adam Kokesh did, but he's one of those guys that spirit's within him, where nothing's going to stop him. And Alex Jones is the same way. Alex talks about, he like breaks he goes on these tirades and then reflections, and he's like, when you have it within you, when this is your mission, this is what guides your every moment. So those are the guys I like. Those are the guys I try to watch because they remind me of who I'm trying to be. You're never a perfect thing. You're always a work in progress, but I'm driven by my mission, and I know the other guys that are driven by their missions, and we all have missions. And my point of what I'm trying to say to everybody is, we all have a mission. It's just a matter of remembering it and bringing it here. And if we're all here voluntarily, we might want to modify the way we govern ourselves. Do we like the way we spend the 40-hour work week? Do we like the monetary system? This is our world. We act as if someone else is in control of the world and that they deserve to control it, and that we're just like peasants or serfs on a manor somewhere. This is our country. This is our planet. We're all here. We're all gamers. Everybody's human. Maybe they're aliens, but the way we're told is everybody's a human. Everybody bleeds. We're all here. We need to figure out how we want to live. And once we figure that out, we could change things and make the world that we all want. The key is we got to figure out what is it that we want. And most of us don't know.
That's a good point. I was going to ask you what your solutions are, but you provided already a few great ones as far as, getting politically active, getting out there. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. And again, I would say that's the number one thing. And, like you said, yourself, me, Alex Jones, a lot of people, the Kokesh, we all kind of just started from nowhere. We just got out there and did, what we believed in, and it's taken us places, had, great conversations with so many people, enlightened me on so many things I would have never thought about. And, I've always been that type of person, too, to just speak my mind. And it's really in society today, the hardest part about doing, those actually making those solutions work is speaking your mind and just saying what you truly believe is now basically politically incorrect.
Right.
And being politically correct is ruled literally how everyone acts. So that's one of the biggest things I think we got to get over is having, like you said, a standard. We're not good enough to rule, or we can't say this, it might offend somebody. Well, you know what? Everything you say can be spun or taken in different contexts. So regardless what you say, you could offend somebody without even knowing it, so you can't worry about it. You can't please everybody. Just go out there and do your best,
Well, and, Thomas Paine, he's like the biggest revolutionary of the revolution, said, I don't think it's right to be governed by the laws of dead men. The things that came before now, but that also kind of flies in the face of the Constitution that he was a part of. So, we got to keep the things that are good, but at the same time, some things should be modified. But the biggest thing, and this is one of the things that I was kind of alluding to with getting involved, but also a lot of activists I know, or protesters, or even libertarians, or politically motivated people, really they're battles within themselves, and they're externalizing their internal anger onto politicians or onto the police or onto something else, instead of pointing the finger back at themselves. And I've been lucky to have people that have put me in check, to say, hey, you need to check yourself. What is it that you're really mad about? You're externalizing your anger onto other things, or things like when I'm speaking on the artificial scarcity, or creating, quasi utopian world, not really utopian, but, better methods of governing. To people that have the power, they're like, look, we're not going to do that for you, but if you want that, you've got to build it. You're sitting there asking us to do it, and it's not in our interest. So if that's something you want, you got to build it. Now know that we're probably going to stand in your way. You got to have the passion, the fire, and the ability to outsmart us to get your way put out there. But you got to build it. Don't wait for us, and don't wait for someone else to build it, because they're not going to. If it's your world and it's the one you want, you got to build it. And so that's what I try to do with my channel, because right now I'm just building thoughts. But when I'm not on air, I'm reading computer books and other things to try to learn how to build robots, build automation, scripts, things that could make life easier, more efficient. And I think that kind of goes into this AI business, is that, in the 80s, I grew up in the 80s, and there was robots everywhere, and then they vanished. And like in 85, 86, kids' birthday parties used to be at this place called Circus Playhouse. And there would be robots there, and they would bring you pizza and Coke, and there'd be a robotic band, and they'd perform. And I'd sit there and look back and I'd say, man, by the time I'm 30, I'm 37 now. I'm like, by the time I'm 30, there's going to be robots doing everything. And the teachers used to say, you kids are so lucky to be born into this futuristic world of technology. You're never going to have to work. There's going to be so many great things for you. And then by the time I was like done with high school, they changed it. They're like, you got to go get yourself skilled and you're going to have to go get a job. And I'm like, well, what happened to the robots? What? The technology exists. It's all been invented. It just hasn't been implemented. And that's one of the things I'm crying for, is to say, hey, everybody, become aware of the technology that exists. People just focus on the surveillance technology with the PRISM database, the Promise database, the surveillance. But if those exist, what else could exist for the people?
Yeah, well, like free energy, Tesla.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been developed. It's broadcast on YouTube from the Navy's official page as showing how laser weapons are used as anti-aircraft, really heavy weaponry to protect them from bombing raids. They've blown up drones, put it on their YouTube video. Yeah. That same technology could be applied to power every single household in the United States, if not the world, and it'll never be brought to the public's public light, period, just because they can't measure it, so they can't profit. So there's these small group of profiteers that are preventing that from happening.
And that's, I had brought up Grunch of Giants by Buckminster Fuller, and that really, if you have a reading list, throw that on your reading list, because he's the guy that made the design for the Epcot ball. Epcot's a big thing for Florida, that ball. And he made a bunch of other inventions. But he's like, he said, he's like, there's a chapter in it that explains like the electric company, how every year they become more and more efficient in their ability to produce electricity. So their costs drop every year, but they raise rates by like 3% to keep the shareholders happy. So, when you examine the economic system, it's not in anybody's favor, and except them. And what good is that? Do you like being metered for things that you shouldn't be metered on? Do you want to be metered for air? Do you want to be metered for water, which we are metered for electricity? And what is electricity? Like, couldn't we have power plants in our own houses? Why does it have to be centralized power? And
in fact, no, Windy City, we cannot have wind, any form of generator, solar power, windmills that provide power, and on top, even the small ones you can install on a roof here, illegal.
Isn't that crazy? Why would that be illegal? I know they have reasons that they make up, but it's clipping your wings. It's making you dependent on the system. And if you're into independence, then it's so anti what, some people like being independent, but for the independent spirit, that's terrible to have to buy into someone else's system. So another guy I was telling about is Jeremy Rifkin. Has he crossed your path yet? Have you heard of him yet?
I think so. Yeah, that's ringing a bell.
I had mentioned him earlier with the near zero marginal cost society, and what he means by that is outside of the Napster for everything. But he's like, look, if the free energy came out, and I don't think he said it in those words, but he was basically implying that, because he's kind of a businessman, so he's not. He kind of speaks in code, and he's like, when the free energy comes out, the majority of the price you pay for goods has to do with the energy cost, the cost of gas to transport and distribute goods. When that cost is no longer, that should dramatically decrease the cost of everything. And, basically it's going to bring the cost of producing everything to near zero marginal cost. So how could they continue to justify the prices for many goods? Now, the response to that is like, well, MP3s and digital books cost more than the actual paper books and the actual CDs. That's insane. It took a lot of effort and capital to produce a compact disc. The plastic, the print, the machinery that made the disc, and then the truck had to distribute it. The retail store had to exist to retail it. So there was a cost built into a CD, and you could see that. You're like, all right, I understand that costs something. But an MP3 is just an idea. It's a digital. You can't touch an MP3. There's no MP3 that you could touch. You could touch an MP3 player, but you can't touch an MP3 or a digital film. You know, you could touch a DVD, but a digital film is just zeros and ones, and they don't physically exist. There's no cost at distributing it. There's a cost in creating, but there's no cost to manufacture and distribute. Yet the prices of those are greater than the physical counterparts that once existed. So they could still charge, but I'm saying for people to be aware of this and think like this, to think on this economic level where it's like, why, you know, the prices should be dropped dramatically and people could have abundance. That's what people want, is abundance.
That's a good point. That's really how they control everything and are profit off of to the extreme amount that they do profit is because they create artificial scarcity on just about every single thing, from gas to like electric, like power, like we were just saying, water, even though in some parts of the country, you know, like California, there are issues, but
Yeah.
you know, for the most part, you know, we had the, as far as a lot of scientists are saying, the water levels are rising, and even in like Lake Michigan here, we've had more flooding on Lakeshore Drive, yet they tell us our fresh water is basically dwindling and we're gonna run out soon. The only way that'll happen is if there's any more oil spills. Like I'm one of the few outlets to cover. We had like the associate of BP spill oil in Whitney refinery in Indiana that's coming due to the current right to Chicago. So, I mean, unless they keep doing that, we're going to have plenty of fresh water just here in Lake Michigan, not, you know, counting all the other bodies of water and rivers and that could supply fresh water. Yet they have about 90% of people believing that there's a true problem there.
Well, you know, when it comes to water, I'm like, hey, we live on the water planet. Colleges, universities brag about all their research money that they get. And I'm like, well, how much research money is going towards desalinization? I can't think of a more important research project than to make desalinization efficient, cost effective. And when I say cost effective, I don't mean so you could charge people for it, but I mean so that you can produce clean water at a low cost, because there is a cost in distributing and cleaning the water. But, you know, desalinization is not a national priority. And I think it should be, to prevent water wars. And around the world, desalinization should be a priority to prevent, you know, like I heard in Jordan, they only get like 400 gallons of water per, it was such a small amount of water that I'm like, man, that's terrible. Imagine. But
yeah, and you have Kivu Pickens drilling into, you know, basically into the aquifers before the fresh water could even get to its actual destination and selling it. You know, we stop things like that, and you know, and basically, or have people do that to pass it out to these countries in need. There wouldn't be an issue. Instead, they charge us.
And he was trying to get access, according to the Jesse Ventura show, he was trying to get access to the water by saying he wanted to build windmills or something. Like the windmills with the cover, but they were all over like water areas. So yeah, that's that deception that I was talking about. Just be upfront about it. But of course, no one is going to give you access to all the water. But it's almost like, I always feel like whoever the they is, tries to run experiments on us just to see what we'll buy. So one of the things they did was the pet rock. I think they had marketing students. They're like, can you sell people something that's so useless and get them to think it's good? So they got the pet rock. And then they did the dog thing where there's no dog, it's the invisible dog. And I think they're like, can we convince people that there's a shortage of water on Earth, the most abundant substance on our planet? Can we convince the world over that there's a shortage of water? And they've successfully done it. And that's what I'm saying. The desalinization, that should be a national priority, because otherwise, if we don't do that, then there's going to be problems. And it's got to be an easy way to do it. Alex Jones is selling that E. coli blue, and he has all these like water purification things. I don't know if you could throw salt water in them, but it seems like it should be possible to,
like the life straw or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought I'm not, don't put me on record, Mr. Jones, but I'm pretty sure you said you could use just about any water that you find in emergency situation, and you did use the life straw to purify it. So there
Yeah.
should be a way. There probably is a way, and we'll probably never find out about that way. Actually, that's
Yeah.
probably pretty simple too.
And
Instead, they put
that's
fluoride in fresh water. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and see, and that's why I try to talk about the artificial scarcity, because then, if you try to sell someone on desalinization, it's like, well, who cares? But then you realize the artificial scarcity, like, hey man, the water thing is going to affect you too. And then to prove the abundance is throughout your entire life, there has, at least for me in Florida, there's never been a moment where I could go to any supermarket or any department store and the shelves not be absolutely filled to the top. Have you ever experienced where you couldn't get whatever it is you wanted at any given time? So that's abundance. That's like insane abundance where you could, anything is available at all times. So how is it possible for them to have abundance on the shelves to sell us, but call it artificially scarce and the rest of us not have it? So I don't,
Very, very simple way to look at it, than disprove, their main theories. But it's also scary, like you said, that how easily they convince the majority of the population that things like water. Yeah, again, we live on a planet mainly of, again, water, and they have successfully convinced us that, yeah, we are, short of it, and yet they are at the same time saying icebergs are melting and ice caps are melting, which would mean there should be more water coming in
right.
at that point too. So, I mean, it's crazy. Just thinking about the whole global warming theory, and how it's really just been disproven already within like 10 years too. I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
they're still pushing that, to me, is absurd that people are still buying it, really.
Yeah, and that, Al Gore was behind it, so that it's like, all right, if it was somebody besides Al Gore, I think global warming would have had, if it was a non-partisan person that was the front person for it, I might have been able to buy into it a little bit more. There was a period where I was like concerned, and it's funny because in one of my books I put the stats that I was given in like 2002. It was like that the CO2 levels are rising at 2 parts per million annually, and there's a point of no return. And at the time in 2002, the year 2016 seemed so far away. But I think 2016 was the year that they estimated was the point of no return. And here we are. I mean, are we at the point of no return or not? Or, they wanted to get a tax passed, it seems. I heard there was like an interview or a speech that Barack Obama gave, and he said, like, even if you don't believe in global warming, you still should pass this bill.
Yeah, and he told the people in Africa not to have air conditionings and all sorts of just crap while he flies in with like 3 separate planes, one for just his dogs, and then one for his wife to go back separately from him. I mean, how absurd is that? That you're going to lecture people on how to use resources wisely when you are literally minimum $1 million a day, you just wasting resources. I mean, come on, dude. Wake up, Obama. I mean, honestly, I don't know how people stood there and clapped for him when you say something so stupid.
Yeah. And not only that, like the stats on food production, because I mean, let alone flying in on an airplane, some of these places, they may not have even adequate food supplies. And I forget what the numbers were on the amount of food that's destroyed annually. And that it's enough to feed the whole planet. And we have like the production means for 11 billion people. Right now we're 7 billion, and yet like 2 billion people go starving every year. And so it's not a technology problem, it's a political problem that we have. And that's kind of what Buckminster Fuller was talking on. And that's what I'm saying is, like, we got to figure out how we want. Does anybody like that? I don't like that reality, and now, obviously, carrying capacity is part of that. So if I guess we got to worry about population, but then that falls into their hands because the population control and whatnot. So, it's hard to know how to solve all the world's problems, but I know ending artificial scarcity would definitely, like, I can't think of a problem that does not resolve. I oftentimes try to do thought experiments to try to find something that artificial scarcity doesn't result, ending artificial scarcity. And I found two. The first one is land. Land actually is scarce. It's probably the only scarce commodity, and it's really not scarce right now. There's still tons of land on planet Earth, or plain Earth, depending on your perspective. But there's right currently there's plenty of land, but at some point there won't be. But it's finite, which means it is not abundant. So that is a real scarce thing. So who gets, because the question that I would get when I promote artificial scarcity is, okay, that's fine, John, but who gets the beachfront property? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really have an answer to that. I don't know. Like, that's the one I can't solve. And then the second question, it's absurd, but the second most common response is, okay, so who gets Angelina Jolie? and I'm like, well, I mean, how do you feel about androids? I mean, or clones? You know, we could probably replicate Angelina Jolie. You know, so and then it's like, well, okay, if you get cloning, obviously, ethics aside, I'm trying to find a solution. You know, so I'm thinking on the spot. I'm like, okay, she's one person, and obviously she's not the person I'm saying. I'm just saying that's the most common response I get. And you know, I try to find a solution. I'm like, okay, well, androids, not robots, but androids and cloning could solve that. Those are crazy answers, but at least I could semi-solve that. Which then begs the question: what is it that you want? You want ownership of conquering, to have something that only you have, or is it just something that you like? I don't know. That's kind of far out there, that part, but the part about land is an accurate one. Land is scarce. But outside of land, I can't think of anything else that is scarce other than individual people.
Air, because eventually we'd have to rip down even more, trees and forests to provide more places to live, which would then lessen the amount of, oxygen available.
Well, tanks, but like oxygen tanks, how do they do it? There's got to be, but okay, yeah, we'll take that. Okay, air could possibly be scarce as well. Air.
I'm not sure. I mean, I just brainstorming that, I was trying to think while you're, talking, but yeah, land would definitely be the main thing, which actually could possibly be the most dangerous too, just because more people, more wars, more people trying to fight for land, more conflicts, and then probably end up being more like gang-like, countries. Just like go back to the old, almost. I don't want to make comparisons to it, but kind of like how the Indian tribes would fight with each other in North America, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny in that land is the most, like, you see it in the jungle and in nature, animals fight over land. So it's like they know the scarcity of land as well, in a way. It's like, so I don't have an answer for that one. But but all the societal problems, which those societal problems could come from land. Maybe land is the origin, and that would let you know why the founding fathers and as well as libertarians believe in land. And being that capitalists and freedom, liberty-minded people, the reason why they're against communism is they don't want the state to own their they want individual property ownership, because not only do you own the land property, but property extends to your body. Your body should be your property, not state property. And once they could own your body, then they could do anything to you. So like that's, to anybody watching, think, that it's like, oh man, John's not down with the left. It's like, it's primarily for the land. And I hope through this exercise, this explains why land is important, because it's the most scarce commodity. And if we surrender that to governments, we're then potentially surrendering our bodies as well. And that's never going to end well.
And then there's the whole microchips, go back to the AI and things like that they're looking at. And, for those that, believe in the book of Revelations with the mark of the beast, it could very well be something similar to a microchip implant. You have that lady promoting getting tattoos to remember your passwords for, I believe it's like Google or something. So they're definitely making a push to control the entire body and mind.
Yeah, and I have a theory too on like the passwords, on how there's an abundance of the required passwords and everything. I think they're trying to make people so like fed up with having to remember so many passwords that they're going to demand biometric thumbprints and eye scans and other biometrics just because they're so tired of trying to remember too many passwords and they just want the ease of use. When they tried to push it in '01, people were, what's funny too is that it's amazing that biometrics didn't happen because part of the 9/11 aftermath, there was funding and tons of money that was there for biometric research. It must just not work as intended, or there must be some major security flaw in it, even though it seems like the most secure kind of method of authentication. You would think that by now biometrics would be far more abundant than they are. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it's one of those surprising things where you're like, man, it's 2016, 15 years later, and I'm still control-alt-deleting into my computer. Like my phone, I use my thumbprint, but and I'm again.
Actually, there's ways that special force, people I know that have been in, like for instance, the Navy SEALs, that they told me that you could replicate thumbprints by using just like simple household items, and I think they said it's similar to the Batman with Catwoman, where she breaks into the more recent one, where the Dark Knight, I guess you could say, where she breaks into Bruce Wayne's safe to get the pearls. They said it's very similar.
Okay, yeah. So, and I think in like Minority Report, they were chopping people's eyeballs out to gain access, but there's also like I guess a temperature. You got to have it's multi-form authentication, but. I'm just saying, it's just amazing that it's not here. It's one of those things.
It's just a Christian pushback to the overall negative perception mainly from Christian groups, seeing that as mark of the beast. It'd be really hard to push it on, the majority of the country. I guess you could say, at least actually majority of the world. But.
And in that, I was talking about that Goody Mob song. They were talking about that too. By having the mark of the beast and the no more fishing for your fish or something is what Big Gip says in the song. So and it's funny too. In '01, before I graduated college in Florida, the first family got microchipped. They were from I think West Palm Beach, and at the time, as I was saying, I was watching all the Christian End Time Prophecy DVDs. Not DVDs, VHS tapes at the time. So I was well aware that these microchips were coming, mark of the beast. And nobody at my college was offended by it. I'm like, you guys don't have a problem with these microchips? And they're like, hey, whatever, dude. What's wrong with you? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, but there's so many warnings for this. This is like the one thing everybody should be, even if it's a good thing, we should be like, no way, dude. It's the mark of the beast. Just stay away. Yeah. And since I got so fed up with people that they didn't care, I was like, man, I got to find a way to profit off this because I want to. I'm losing with the people. I got to win. So I Applied Digital Solutions was the company. I was like, I'm going to buy a bunch of shares of their company, and I hope it fails. And if it fails, I'll happily lose my money. If it succeeds, okay, well, I'll make some money. And the most insane thing I saw in 2007, I thought they were defunct as a company. I was at a Miami Dolphin game, and in the stadium, they had like this new ring of lights with advertisements from all the supermarkets. There was a ring thing that said, "Have you been chipped?" And it just kept blinking and going around and around. And I'm like, and again, I'm looking at the people behind me. I'm like, do you guys see this? Do you see what's going on? And they're like, what? I'm like, it says, "Have you been chipped?" And there's a chip mobile right outside the stadium where you could go to the football game, get, "Have you been chipped?" And then when you leave the game, you could get microchipped. I don't know how, yeah, and how people didn't like tip that van over, the chip mobile over. It's crazy.
Same thing at Navy Pier out here in Chicago. I was on a date, and a girl actually is pretty aware of the tyranny in our government, you could say. And we're sitting there on the Ferris wheel, and on the way already, we started taking video. There's about 30 to 40 black helicopters coming back to again, flying literally below the skyscrapers, maybe 150 feet in the air, and we're on the Ferris wheel, and we start seeing a swarm of them coming in. The weird thing is you could barely hear them until they got right up to you. Barely see them either. There was really no identification of any kind, barely any light, and they landed not 100 yards away from like 5,000 people on a beautiful summer night last summer. And nobody noticed them except for me, the girl I was with, and one other girl was taking a video and was like, this is ridiculous. What they were just flying. I see them flying through downtown all recklessly. What they hit a building. Like, what are they doing? And I told them, I'm like, this is probably a, drill, domestic, domestic training, really, could be training for urban warfare, I hope, like with another country, but it could be training to come get us, and she looked at me, wow. But there must have been 1,000 people that just walked right by these things and didn't give a shit. I mean, I hate to say it, but
I guess they trust their government, The response I've gotten to, like, when I've shown people the domestic training is they've said to me, well, aren't you glad that they train in semi-real world conditions? I mean, and I'm like, okay, you kind of got me checkmated there, but when they scare the heck out of kids, that's not cool. Traumatize kids forever and condition people for that. Yeah, I mean, the argument could be made. I don't know. It might be naive or what, or maybe I'm thinking that hopefully they have a positive reason why they do it and not just to round everybody up. But hey, it could happen too. Like, for instance, when all those, like, the 2 billion bullets got purchased,
hollow points,
and I had some buddies, and these are guys I trust that I grew up with. They do law enforcement, and they're like, look, dude, if you do the math on that, that's really not that many bullets. Like, because think about yourself. When you go to the range, how much do you shoot? I'm like, usually 100 minimum. Right. Okay. So do the math on that. Now imagine the whole police force. Don't you want those guys to go to the range every week, just like you're going to the range? I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. But those are hollow points. I don't shoot hollow points at the range. Why do they got hollow point bullets? They should have full metal jackets or something. Like, So I don't know. Who knows?
And the child targets, the pregnant women targets. Yeah. Those are what really bothered me more. And on top of that, too, Joe Biggs got caught up at, I forgot the exact name of the training facility. I spoke with him on the ride up there. So him and David Knight, got caught in a place where they had mosques. They had a mock, Washington subway, Washington, D.C. subway. Yeah. And I get a call from, basically a private number asking me what I talked about from Joe, what Joe told me, what Joe sent me. If I didn't tell them, they'll find out anyway. They'll come here and get my phone. I better tell them the truth. This is national security. Basically got called by a Secret Service, man. Threatening to come here and raid my house, and I didn't receive anything. Me and Joe were talking about when he was going to come on my show, which he ended up doing the next day. But they took him in for like an hour or something, and at that point they had his phone, and that's when they must have called me.
Well, that's spooky. That's really spooky. Because, wow. Because one of the things, like, growing up, a lot of people used to always say, like, aren't you worried that the men in black are going to come knock on your door? And I'm like, they haven't yet. And they still haven't to this day. And, but that's wild that you actually got the visit. So, or at least the phone call.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could Google my name and death threats. Wow. When Joe got the cop arrested in Ferguson, I had a guy, Bill Scott, on my show, whose son was a West Point grad, and I think he was transporting organs for a company. So he had to have a concealed carry permit. He went into Costco, got shot like way too many times. They broke into his house, stole another gun, said he was carrying 2 guns. His dad came on, wrote a book about it called The Permit, had him on numerous times. Great guy, Bill Scott. And that night, I had over 120, I forget the amount of times they called, missed calls. And, I answered a few, but the last one I answered was basically, hey, you don't know what you're getting yourself involved in. You better knock this shit off. Tell Joe Biggs, your old buddy. Tell your buddy Biggs is exactly what he said. That he's going to get what's coming to him, and tell that old man he better shut his fucking mouth before something happens to him.
Wow.
And they use, like, sound like the guy from Scream, like they're using like really, some sort of voice more for.
Wow, man. Yeah, dude. I mean, if you guys were in on someone else's territory, they're going to protect their turf. I guess maybe that's what happened. And
Could have been an officer somewhere. My number is available on places online that, just got upset hearing the content. And,
yeah,
we played the clip about with Joe getting the guy fired and hearing the show and maybe, just went overboard. But I don't know. They definitely knew a little too much about things. So whoever did call, they did their homework. It was only hours since the show finished when they started, so it'd be pretty damn hard to do that much research in a
right.
couple hours.
Well, and that's kind of like why I'm saying for people to create their own lane, because when you fight the power, you're fighting their turf, and if I was the power, I'd be like, hey, if you're fighting on my turf, I'm going to protect my turf or my land because it's scarce. But if you could create your own lane, like Stephen Greer, I don't know what his real deal is, but he did say in one of his videos, he goes, we're not going to, we've been asking Washington. Instead of waiting on Washington, we're just going to evolve without them. We're going to move on. And like a lot of the movements that are going on, it gives more power to those that we're against instead of just creating our whole entire world that we want, outside of, not saying we got to break away, but, create the world that we want. And like right now, everything is naked as far as the election process goes. Because it's Trump's up there saying, "Hey, man, this thing is rigged." We could see that they don't want they had their candidates already picked, and that's not happening their way, and they're threatening to disrupt the whole process to get what they want, which seems to be Hillary Clinton. And now it's naked for all to see, and it's like for those that have said your vote doesn't count and all those things, they're like vindicated through this whole process, or the people that said, "Hey, the whole thing is rigged." Before there was plausible deniability, but now it's like, hey, yes, it's there for all to see. And this is the kind of stuff that I think like info warriors want to do. It's like, we want to finally make it so obvious so that's how change comes about, because now the masses are seeing this. You can't ignore this. You can't just, the plausible deniability is gone. That's what, even 9/11 still has some plausible deniability, even though there's hardly any, but people could still cling on to something. But as far as this election cycle, you'd be naive to think that everything is just fine and dandy. And this is what needs to happen with artificial scarcity, with all kinds of these topics, is to isolate it. So now with voting, we've isolated it, which also says, okay, the political parties, the RNC and the DNC, they seem to be in cahoots. I'm not saying the conservatives or the libertarians are part of that, but the establishment of both the RNC and the DNC, they almost seem like the same party. So when like Jesse Ventura says the Republicrats and Democrats, before he was written off, Democrats and Republicans, before he could just be written off. But now you look back, you're like, man, Jesse was right, and he's vindicated in that. So now more people are going to start watching the Alex Jones show. They're going to check out Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory or Off the Grid or whatever he's doing now, and look at alternative media. And so it's important now that AJ comes correct, because he's going to be getting mainstream people that are now looking for alternatives than the mainstream, because what they're seeing, what they're experiencing is the opposite of what's being projected on television.
Well said. Well, I hate to do this, man, but I kind of got to get going, John. But I'd love to welcome you back on and really get in more greater detail on things like, the White Book, and greater detail on like, Tupac, and actually even hear more about your, current take on more current events, man. It was really nice getting to speak with you. I definitely feel like we're on the same team here, and it's good to collaborate. Nice to meet you. Nice to get to speak with you and just share your knowledge onto people not only like myself, but this will live forever online as long as they don't censor it again. But I'd love to have you on anytime, man. It's pretty much every Monday and Tuesday and Friday I'm free. So if you ever want to come on again, you're more than welcome. Shoot me a text. I'll shoot you a text. We can make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The feeling is totally mutual, and stay in touch. And yeah, we could do this again anytime. I'm just like you. I'm here to just bring it. I got nothing else to give but me. So yeah, we could do this anytime, and just definitely keep in touch as things happen. Because for me, it's been just as much enjoyable as it seems to have been for you. So this was definitely
Thank
an
you.
enjoyable time. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Before I let you go, is there any websites or you'd like to share, for people watching us where they can find your work and stuff like that?
Yeah, I focus on my YouTube channel, so it's youtube.com/Jonathan Lippe. You could get Simulation Theory at Amazon.com. I'm currently narrating the book on my channel, so you could follow along with that if you don't want to buy it. But if you want to buy it, it's there. There's also links to get the PDF for free of it. So yeah, pretty much my YouTube channel. I have other sites, but I'm trying to drive everything towards YouTube now because that seems to be the platform that people can interact with the best, and video, audio, it's the full experience. So
Good strategy. I agree completely with that. I think it's the future. Yeah, man, it was a pleasure having you on, and thanks everybody for tuning in to the broadcast tonight on April 18th of 2016. And honest to God, I'd love to do this again sometime really, really soon. And share, like, comment, let us know what you think about what we've discussed. And, hopefully we can do another show and respond to either, your rebuttals of our theories that we brought up, or, elaborate on some things that you guys inject into the topics we discussed.
absolutely.
All right. Well, nice getting to meet you, John, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Peace in the Middle East, baby.
Have a good one, Pete. See ya.
You too. I hate when that happens.
Bunch of dishonest people. They've created ISIS. Hillary Clinton created ISIS with Obama. Created with Obama. They have a bunch of dishonest people. They've created ISIS. Hillary Clinton created ISIS with Obama.
Explosions, it's just part of a training exercise. It's taking place in and around the Chicagoland area, including, according to the patch, at the shuttered Mental Health Center at 183rd and Harlem. The routine training is to prepare servicemen and women for operating in urban environments overseas as they prepare for deployment.
New 6:30 Chicago police are warning people who... We gon' fight the system. Yes, I believe it's my fate to lead my people to freedom, just like I'm Caesar the 8th. Now follow me.
Fucking helicopter Pete is back.
Of the act of the U.S. president. Because this guy is the deputy prime minister. It's 7 Russians. It is 4 Ukrainians. Together it's 11. The European Union's putting sanctions on 21 individuals. This is a country of 150 million people. We have targeted 7 in Russia. You talk about scared straight. My goodness. You couldn't get a kid to stop shoplifting for this type of revocations. This is what the deputy prime minister says. I have no investments in the U.S. Right. He says, in fact, he's best friends with Steven Seagal. He says, all I care about is Tupac Shakur, and I think his name, and Allen Ginsberg, and Jackson Pollock. Those are the only three interesting things I find in America.
Well, the tweets are actually interesting.
You know what gang violence is? Mostly, people don't want you to hear this. Somebody shoots your family member. Of course you retaliate. You know what I mean? Same thing the U.S. does. Said nobody even shot their family members. You know, so they see somebody bomb a school and all these people get killed, so the United States feel like, well, that's messed up. We gotta go show them who the real killers. This country was built on gangs. This country still is run on gangs. Republicans, Democrats, the police department, the FBI. See, those are gangs. You know what I mean? The correctional officers. I had a correctional officer tell me straight up, you the biggest gang in New York State. Straight up.
Another meditated scheme, introduce a drug called crack. To us ghetto teens, got a lot for farm niggas now. Playing what it be like. Real niggas see they got us bleeding with 3 strikes. Can't seem to focus, hopeless. With volleyball, I wrote this. Got these devils petrified. Hiding from my hopeless focus. And so I learned to earn my currency in overtime. Affiliated, clearly click a military bonds. Make out for killers, so we dwell inside of paradox. Thug out, drug dealing from the womb to the block. My lifeline got me surviving 5 rounds. My 45 got me 45 with live rounds. When shit's hit, we fly hits. Run Glock 6, all hail, I don't bear wrath that Tupac lips. Forever carry necessary pictures, food stamps. Outlaw hood niggas never left the pool. We have a real life shit. Die. Keep my niggas in the world, Tupac to die. Put my soldiers to die. Where the fuck my soldiers at? Put my soldiers to die. We got the real life shit. Die. Keep my niggas in the world, Tupac to die. Where my soldiers to die. Put my soldiers to die. Where the fuck my soldiers at? Put my soldiers to die. I was cool as a rebel, making trouble for the devil, taking gang bang shit to a whole nother level. Can you feel me now? Armies in every city, definition of power. Well, you get to see the war is the prophecy, survival is the strategy. Rest in peace to my comrades, that's the CC. Walking out the streets of time, yeah, these devils petrified of a nigga in his right mind. They tell us that we hopeless and hellbound. It's for the governors and penitentiary jail them. I got you in my heart till the day I die. Think of the damage we could do if we wasn't high. Can you picture me, look? It's a thug's rap. Political contracts and bloodbaths. From a Toulouse core up in the Rockets, though they got you. I never let them stop me. The struggle continues.
If we do want to live a thug life and a gangster life and all of that, okay? So stop being cowards. Let's have a revolution. But we don't want to do